have the great pleasure today of introducing Tim Busse. Tim Busse was appointed to the Bloomington City Council in April of 2011 and then won re-election to a 4-year term as council member at large in November of that same year. Tim's council priorities of business development and both traditional and alternative transportation are seen in his efforts beyond City Hall. He serves on the board of directors of the Bloomington Chamber of Commerce and on the Bloomington Port Authority. He has also served on the boards of 2 transportation-related organizations, the I-494 Corridor Commission and the I-35W Solutions Alliance. Professionally, Tim is communications director for the University Services at the University of Minnesota. With more than 3,000 employees in 6 major functions, University Services provides the critical infrastructure, operations, and services needed to support the university's mission and overall academic plan. Tim's communications responsibilities include media relations, emergency communications, internal staff communications, web content, and an active blog. In addition to his communications duties, Tim is the chair of the Large Scale Events Committee, which oversees the planning and coordination of special events on campus. In recent years, Tim has led efforts to successfully stage a visit by President Barack Obama, a Monday night football game, a concert by U2, a visit by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and the Republican National Convention activities. I happen to know, this is off script, Tim, I happen to know also that Tim is a loyal friend of the arts, especially performing arts, and has firsthand experience as an actor. So please join me in welcoming Tim Busse.
Thank you for having me today. On behalf of Mayor Winstead and the rest of the council, thank you for inviting me and having me. And on behalf of the Downtown Rotary Club number 9, of which I'm a proud member, thank you for opening your doors and your arms and welcoming me here today. I do appreciate it. I was speaking last Friday, the Human Rights Commission did a nice event about Negro League Baseball in Minnesota. And Frank White from Richfield, you may know him, Frank gave the talk. And I made the point, I said, now, if we're talking about baseball, it has to get warmer, right? It really does have to get warmer. And then it didn't. It actually got colder. And so now I'm thinking, okay, if we're talking about potential road construction, it has to get warmer now, doesn't it? Everybody nod your head and please say yes, it has to get warmer at some point. I will tell you, talking with Kurt Hagan over lunch, he did assure me that the new hotel at the Mall of America will not be known as the Two Seasons Resort. We will still have, we may get up to 4. Thank you so very much. I'm going to talk today 494-35W, and the genesis of all this, as Andrea said, I served on the Corridor Commission and the Solutions Alliance for 2 groups that are intimately involved in this and have it as one of their top priorities to see this rebuild get done. And actually last fall, our friends at the Bloomington Optimist Club called and said, would you like to speak to the group? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And we arranged a date and went back and forth. And I checked their website just to get times and to specify, and it said Tim Busse talking about his candidacy for Bloomington City Council. And I called him and I said, you guys know that I'm not running, right? I'm one of the few not up for re-election, so I'm not running for re-election. I can't talk about my candidacy. And even though it was on the phone, I could hear this look in the background. And so they were a bit surprised, and I said, well, in short of that, how about if I talk about 494-35W, and they were happy to accept that because I don't think they wanted to reschedule anybody and have to deal with that. So that's what I'm doing here today. Just want to run through some information, give you an idea of where we are with this project, this massive project, this very important project. We'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end, but we're informal enough. If you have any questions during the presentation, just shout them all out and we can deal with them then. I do have to say I love sitting next to Karen again. Karen and I sat next to each other in council for a couple of years, and we used to share notes and whisper back and forth. I don't know if you could see that on TV or not, or if you watched it all. And then invariably, every council meeting, Karen's phone would go off. It would ring. And Karen would get her phone out and mess around with her phone and put it down. And 5 minutes later, Karen's phone would go off again. So it was, but it's good sitting next to you again, Karen. It did. That's where we are. That's what we're going to do. If you have any questions, please do jump right in. So talking 494 and 35W. So the 35W 494 interchange was built in 1959. For the record, 6 years before I was born, okay? 6 years before I was born. That's what it looked like in 1959, all right? And that's what it looks like today. Do you want me to go back and see that again? You want to see that one more time? That's what it looked like in 1959, and that's what it looks like today. There have been no substantial changes to that interchange in more than 50 years, which is a bit of an issue, because anybody want to guess how many daily users we have on that interchange alone?
Too many.
Too many is the correct answer, yes. 135 is the former mayor's guess. Anybody else? 200,000? Nah, not quite 1 million, but that would be nice. It would be a nice round number. 510,000 trips per day in that interchange, which is twice what it was originally designed to hold. 510,000 trips per day. I know I'm one of them, or probably two or more of them each day, and many, we all are. And we know it is certainly an issue, the fact that this interchange, which is more than 50 years old, handles twice the number of cars that it's supposed to, and does it, quite honestly, does it very poorly. It really does it very poorly. If we look at the peak hour congestion, and this map is just a bit dated, but you look there, 35W sees 3 to 5 hours a day of congestion. 494 sees at least 6 hours a day of congestion. And congestion meaning the speeds slow down to, I think it's less than 35 miles an hour. That's how we define congestion. It is obviously very significant. In addition to being slow, it is a crash site. It is where the MnDOT did a study back in 2012. It's the 8th highest crash cost site in the state of Minnesota. Now, I always used to joke, the crashes, they couldn't be too bad because nobody was moving. I mean, if you're crawling along at 5 miles an hour, how bad could the crash be? I said that until last week when my wife totaled her car at 35W and 494. She was actually stopped as they were clearing snow, and someone hit her from behind and drove her into the vehicle in front of her and totaled the car. So she is all right, yes, yes. So we have firsthand knowledge. Everybody probably has a story to tell about something along those lines. So it is obviously a crash site as well. You look at it also, this is the Metropolitan Council's, this is their regional transit plan. And all the different lines of red, which include the bus rapid transit, the central corridor, the Hiawatha line, and so on, all of the different things that they have planned for the next 20 years in the Twin Cities metropolitan area, and right in the nexus, right in the middle, is that 35W 494 interchange. And we've just talked about how bad that whole thing is. And so it's congested, it's crashed, there are crashes, it's in the middle of everything that is important to Twin Cities transportation, but it's also significant in terms of employment. This is an important corridor in the state of Minnesota. There are more jobs in that corridor, almost 200,000 jobs, than there are in 494 with the Golden Triangle, we're counting the Golden Triangle, than there are in downtown Minneapolis. Golden Triangle is out in Eden Prairie. You have heard, very good, very good. Who are also big supporters of this plan. So our friends in Eden Prairie also suggest this. So obviously, this isn't working. It is not working and hasn't worked for a number of years. It's not news to anyone that it hasn't worked. And in fact, long before I arrived on the city council, back in 2001, they actually said, okay, we've got to do something about this. We really need to do something. They did an environmental impact statement. They started to do a layout. They kind of looked at what could we do? How could we deal with all of this? And this is what they came up with. And I think this is usually where the mayor would say, and Councilmember Nordstrom would have no chance of getting in and out of this, because it's, and it gets worse, Karen. It's going to be more confusing. So this is how they had it all laid out with flyovers and different things. And they looked at it as a possibility, and the price tag was, back in 2001, $270 million plus. At least $270 million, which immediately killed the project. Immediately killed the project. It was seen as, the way MnDOT's thinking started changing in the early 2000s, that rather than spending massive amounts on these huge projects, they wanted to spend smaller amounts on individual projects where they could see a quick return on their investment, and they could get the projects done and have a big bang for the buck. $270 million was just too much for them to spend. Although I will point out, for that cost, for the cost of about 4 of these interchanges, we're getting a Viking stadium. So it all kind of balances out, and it does work out nicely. So this was back in 2001, and it just kind of, it languished for a while. Everyone, again, knew there was a problem. There was discussions, but nothing really came about until 2010, when another preliminary design report was put together, looking at it once again, trying to think of how can we work our way out of this, what would be the way to do this. And this design report actually came up with various roadway possibilities. It looked at the original one from 2001, but then looked at a big flyover, and then layout 3, which was the most intriguing, was the turbine style. And it all did well in terms of relieving the congestion and improving safety. Actually, the turbine style was the least cost prohibitive, just because there are fewer flyovers and less concrete involved. And so it was something they looked at. But also in this preliminary design report, they looked at bus rapid transit options. And obviously, we'll talk more about this in just a minute, but bus rapid transit, which you may or may not have heard of, the idea of treating buses more like trains, but still being buses. So it's easy on and off, prepaying of the tickets, more reliable service, just a more pleasant ride than a typical bus that stops every block. These have fewer stops and make things more appealing to potential bus riders. So they looked at possible bus rapid transit stations alternatives, including right in the middle of the freeway at American Boulevard, some at the sides, and as I said, we'll talk more. We'll get into that a little bit more. And in addition, they looked at various park and ride alternatives, because the idea is that once a bus rapid transit station was in place, we'd eliminate the park and ride over at Best Buy, and we'd somehow have a park and ride option, including the possibility of one built right over the top of the freeway, which I think is an interesting thought. So these were all considered. And all these different pieces of the puzzle were looked at and considered. And as I said, the turbine alternative kind of became the most promising alternative, just because of the lowest cost in terms of the concrete that would be involved, and also the fact that, as I said, it would reduce travel times and improve safety. And that is a confusing layout. If you take a look at it, I'll leave that up there. You can take a look for just a minute, but that would be a confusing one. But again, it was a possibility, and it looked like it would work, and then the price tag came in at $237 million. Less than the $270 million back in 2001, but still a pretty significant chunk of change of $237 million. The good part about the turbine design, however, was the fact that it could be broken down and built in phases. And if you look at it, the worst possible movement is north on 35W to west on 494. So if we could solve that, we could at least start to take a bite out of this. We could at least start to make some progress. And we looked at that possibility. We could build this in phases, and we could do a roadway improvement. You can see here, it's the north 35 to west on 494. And if we could at least get that taken care of, we'd at least be on our way. We could worry about the rest of the phases as we go, but at least we'd be on our way with some of this. And we looked at that, and the cost for that whole interchange was $26 million. This is 2010, $26 million. Very reasonable. Also took a look at the bus rapid transit, the roadway, the station, buying up the park and ride, and so on. That was roughly $52 million. And so the two of them together was $78 million. Much more reasonable than the $270 million, more reasonable than the $237 million. It was a possibility, and at least caught some people's attention and realized maybe we could get this done. So MnDOT then started looking at, they did what they called a vision layout study. And with the vision layout study, they did a scope of work and took a look at the different pieces of the puzzle, the traffic analysis, the bus rapid transit piece of it. There's some water retention. There's water issues in that area, so we'd have to look at the different water issues. They looked at the scope of the, there we go. They looked at the expected outcomes, what they wanted to actually accomplish, to identify different things and to update the cost estimates and to make it as actually as possible, as real as possible as they looked at things. And then they put a schedule out, which was, it kicked off about a year ago. They've had a number of public meetings. They looked at different possibilities. And if you notice here, fall 2013, the bridge type study, fall 2013, select transit station and/or park and ride location. We were hoping for that back in November or October. We do not have that yet. And I'm guessing it will be a while before we have that. And this idea of a fall 2013, spring 2014 public meetings, we're not close to that yet. We're not there because MnDOT is still working through some of the numbers, some of the details. But again, at least they're gathering the input and they're trying to figure out how to make this all work. And that's the encouraging part. That's the encouraging part. And this all ties together, importantly, with the 20-year state highway investment plan. Minnesota Go is what it says. The 20-year state highway investment plan. And if you go through this, well, we'll just click through this because I can tell you folks that the rebuild of 494-35W is not on the 20-year investment plan for the state of Minnesota. Not there anywhere. And again, the reasons being that they don't want to invest, they don't want to take the big bite of the apple, they want something that is more manageable, more cost-effective, that gives them a better return on the investment. So it's not there, it isn't there at all. And which obviously put everything kind of a chill on all the work that had been done and the discussions that had been had. Then came along in the 2013 legislature, the Corridors of Commerce. The Corridors of Commerce, the legislature, they authorized $300 million in bonds for transportation projects. And I took this language right out of their press release, right off of their website. So you can see things promoting transportation, identified as vital links for the regional and statewide economic growth. That sounds like our interchange, doesn't it? Or 2 major goals of the program: to provide additional highway capacity and to safely improve the movement of freight and reduce barriers to commerce. The program is intended to identify projects that promote commerce and freight mobility and are not currently programmed for construction. That's us perfectly, isn't it? That is it. Well, here are the 10 that were selected. And while I've got nothing against the passing lanes from Wilmer to I-90 on Highway 23, I think they're all wonderful projects and they've got plenty going for them. I really do question the level of priority, putting them higher than 494-35W. We have seen, we've documented, we've shown that it is a necessary thing, and even the corridors of commerce are not a possibility. And now it's tricky. This was a one-time appropriation by the legislature. They let the bonds for $300 million, and by doing that, what they did was, in effect, they maxed out the state's credit card in terms of bonds. So there isn't any more available. So there is not more funding available from that route, which makes it difficult. Chris, you had a question?
I'm just curious, of these 2 plans that you just addressed, is there any overlap in terms of which projects were selected?
Of these projects, you mean, or?
Yeah, because you made mention of that 20-year, and then you made mention of this one.
Yes, I believe, I couldn't tell you exactly which, but I believe there were 1 or 2 that may have slight overlap. But if you remember the corridors of commerce, they can't be slated for, if we head back here, not currently programmed for construction. So generally, if they're on the 20-year list, then they weren't on this list. They weren't on the corridors of commerce. So this is projects that will begin through 2016. So I think some started this year, some will start this year, and then 15 and into 16. Yes?
Who makes the decision about what goes on?
That was, it was a combination of MnDOT Commissioner Charlie Zelli, the governor, the input they had from the different applications. Bloomington was the lead agency to put forth an application for this, for 494-35W, and it did not meet the criteria. So we lost, unfortunately, and lost to some, as I said, I'm sure they're very good projects and very worthwhile projects, but they were deemed more important than 35W 494. Yes?
Highway 14 has been on MnDOT's list for 30 years and is still the highest death trap of all the highways going from Faribault or from Winona all the way up to Mankato. So it doesn't surprise me it's on there because that has been a big problem.
No, certainly, and as I said, I don't mean to disparage any of the projects that were chosen, because I know they're worthwhile, and I'm sure the people in those communities are just ecstatic that they're going to be done. But we were hoping, I think, to at least get some preliminary money to begin looking at the northbound to westbound movement in the 494-35W interchange.
How about the federal money? Is any
federal money is another possibility, and I'll say we continue to look at options, we continue to look at possibilities as to where, how to fund all of this and how to make this all happen, and federal money is certainly one that's being considered as well.
Chief. So, I mean, if the data is so glaring, how does something like this happen? I mean, is it the 169, they got some money a couple of years ago? Are they saying, I know that there was some money that went to the northern suburbs? Is this volleyball approach to funding? I mean, but what the data is glaring is this intersection would indicate. It just baffles me as to how we're sitting here with really no plan for the future.
Transportation funding and transportation planning, I think in the state of Minnesota, it's a very political beast, obviously. It's the balance between not only the metro area and greater Minnesota, it's a balance between roads and transit, and then it becomes a balance between the North Metro and the South Metro. As we prepared our application, we were told pretty clearly, where is it now, that 610 was probably going to be the big winner because it was in the North Metro and it was time for 610 to be done. And so yes, there's criteria, yes, there's objective data showing the need, but boy, transportation funding and prioritization in Minnesota really is a political football. It really is. Somebody, Dave.
Tim, when you say we, is it just the city of Bloomington?
It is not just the city of Bloomington. Thank you very much for asking that. When we submitted the application, we did it on behalf of a number of folks and had them sign on. I know the city of Eden Prairie signed on. The two coalitions that I referenced earlier, the 494 Corridor Commission and the 35W Solutions Alliance, made this their highest legislative priority, and they signed on to this application. So it's not as though the city of Bloomington is standing alone and requesting this. There are other communities, a number of other communities who are on board and are pushing hard for this.
I mean, you talked about how you guys broke it down, so there was just a section of the freeway that you're going to build to kind of cut down that cost, and then the transit piece. Had they ever come back and said, hey, if you cut this down, let's say you were able to put the project within $30 million, where they say, hey, then we'll put it in there? Or was that never really a discussion?
I don't know there was ever feedback. I think it was an application, and I don't know that there was any back and forth between the agency and the applicants. So I don't think so.
So where does this leave you?
Well, we're not done yet, Neil. We still have some things to talk about here. We still have some things to talk about, and I mentioned it a little bit, the bus rapid transit, and this may be something we need to consider. This may be the saving grace to it all. I showed you this map earlier. Here's the regional transit plan for the Met Council, and there we are, right in the middle. And this line, this bright red line, that's 35W. We're not getting light rail anytime soon, but what they have talked about is the orange line bus rapid transit line. And the orange line would run basically from downtown Minneapolis through Bloomington and down, I believe, to Lakeville or beyond, point south. I'm not sure exactly where they've got it ending now. So the orange line bus rapid transit, which would complement the red line, which is currently up and running, and then feeds into the blue line or the Hiawatha line. The green line is the central corridor, the green line light rail, and this is the ultimate or eventual Southwest Transit, if they can, or the Southwest corridor, if they can get that figured out, headed out into St. Louis Park. So there's the orange line, and there would be a number of different stations, and as they affect us, we've got the 98th Street station, the American Boulevard station, which should be a very big circle there because they weren't exactly sure how it was all going to work, and then the 66th Street station in Richfield. In addition to the orange line bus rapid transit, we also have these regional transit connections, an arterial bus transit way that they're envisioning running down American Boulevard between the Southwest Transit Station out in Eden Prairie all the way over to the Mall of America. So an east-west connection, definitely a needed east-west connection that would complement the north-south connection of the orange line. So we're having these discussions and thinking about this. And obviously it makes sense that if we're going to do one thing, if we're going to rebuild 494 35W, and if we're going to make adjustments to accommodate bus rapid transit in some way, it all has to work together. It has to make sense. Especially when we really started to look at some of these options and the Met Council started coming up with some possibilities as to where to put this orange line. Now let me run this one past you. Here is what the original thought was. So here is 35W. and American Boulevard, and the thought was there would be an inline station right at American Boulevard where people would board, and then it would just head right up 35W into downtown Minneapolis. Obviously, it's a good spot. It connects, it's where 35W and American Boulevard, you draw the circle around there, you can envision perhaps park and ride, you can envision how it could benefit pedestrians and so on. But then they brought up a possible alternative, the Knox Avenue alternative, where buses would get off on 82nd Street, come over to Knox, and there would be a stop just north of American Boulevard, which would play very well with our Penn American District Plan, which we're planning for the Southtown area, the city's long-term goals or plans to transform that area into more of a residential, retail, urban mix, as opposed to the shopping mall that it is now. And then as it crosses 494, underneath 494, there would be another stop up near Best Buy, which would reach into Richfield and which would give access to all the folks who live within walking distance of the 76th Street and Knox Avenue interchange. So it makes a lot of sense. It would basically double the number of stops, only slow down the bus by I think 1.5 minutes is what they figured, but it would serve a significantly greater number of people than just the stop at American Boulevard. So a very real possibility. The council, the Bloomington City Council, has endorsed this as the way to go. Met Council is still trying to decide exactly how it's all going to work. They're still trying to figure this one out. This plays a big role because, as I said, it all works together. There is no sense in building this without a 494 35W rebuild. And so there is the possibility that there is our possibility to do this is with combining the two projects and making sense and taking the big bite of the apple rather than the little bite. Just so you know, and I like this one also, this is the 98th Street station. Here's the current 98th Street station. For the bus rapid transit, there would be a quick stop just off, not all the way into the station, but in the access road and then back onto the freeway, and then coming south, the stops would likely be on the on-ramp. And I like to show this picture as well because if you look really closely, I think right there is my truck, and you can see it because of the rust on the truck. So it's pretty obvious that it is indeed mine. So thank you very much for your time. I'll be happy to answer any more questions that you do have. And the action item for all of you is be informed, be aware, and when the call to action comes, when we get closer and we really need this, we need to push this through, I would hope as active and informed and caring Rotarians, you would help us seal the deal and push this on through. So I will stick around if anyone has additional questions, but thank you much for your time.